I am recording this video just a few hours after the Miami Heat lost to the Los Angeles Clippers, who were playing without Kawhi Leonard or Paul George. And this game was just a great way of highlighting the struggles that the Miami Heat have had this season thus far. After this game, the Heat now fall to 11-16, which keeps them well out of the playoffs in the Eastern Conference. They have struggled all year. Now, there are a good amount of excuses for this, and we're going to be going over that. But for the most part, these struggles have been legit non-excusable, and because of these struggles, people have been asking, were the 2020 Miami Heat, who ended up going to the NBA Finals, frauds? Is what they did that season a fluke? And I wanted to discuss whether or not that was actually true. The Miami Heat were the underdogs of the 2020 NBA playoffs. They ended up making a finals appearance when pretty much nobody expected that to be the case. They beat the Milwaukee Bucks in the second round, which was incredibly shocking to many people. They beat the Celtics in the conference finals, and they even gave the Lakers a run for their money in the finals themselves. But with the struggles that the Heat have had this year, well, was that a fluke? Let's talk about it.
Saved! Absolutely incredibly with the acrobatic alley-oop!
Before this video starts, about half of the people that watch these videos are not subscribed, so if you fall into that 50%, then subscribe. You get these videos in your sub box, and it helps fuel my ego. Also, drop a like on this video. It only takes 1 second, and it makes a massive difference. Also, real quick, there is a new podcast over on the podcast channel. We had TSO Sage on the pod, who, if you're a fan of him, you're really going to enjoy that podcast. That is going to be linked in the description. Also, new My NBA video going over the second round of the playoffs versus the Celtics is out over on my 2K channel. But with that out of the way, let's talk about the Miami Heat. Now, as I said, there are some valid excuses for the Miami Heat and their struggles this year. The biggest one being either it be injury or virus protocol preventing players from playing. They have had guys miss a lot of games. Tyler Hero has missed 8 games. Jimmy, which is the biggest one, has missed 11 games. Bam has missed 2 games, both of which were losses, which having Bam for the Joel Embiid matchup is pretty important. So when he's not there, it's a recipe for losing, which they did. Goran Dragic has missed 9 games. Nunn, who's been good for the Heat this year, has missed 7 games. Avery Bradley has missed 17, and he was their big free agent acquisition. Also, overall, shooting for this team has really fallen off. The Heat last year were one of the better three-point shooting teams in the league. In fact, they were second in overall three-point percentage for the league. This year, however, not so much. They have fallen to 20th, and their three-point rate has also dropped. So they're shooting less threes on worse efficiency. And being that three-point shooting is such a huge part of basketball, and specifically such a huge part of this team, dropping from second to 20th is going to be noticeable in the win column. Also, a potential narrative thing that could be getting in the heads of these players, though I don't think it's too impactful, is like going from an underdog to like expected to be a contender. We've seen this type of thing happen with the 2019 Boston Celtics, where 2018, because they were the underdog, they had all this fuel going for them and they were awesome. And then the next year there were expectations, and that kind of made them struggle. Those expectations, they failed to live up to them, and that was pretty damn rough. Now, I don't think this is a case nearly as extreme as the 2019 Celtics, but I do think that is somewhat of a factor here. And another thing that I think is bigger than it's been given credit for, which honestly I understand, I believe that Jay Crowder was a pretty big loss for this team. Now, I mentioned Avery Bradley as a big free agent acquisition. He was supposed to kind of make up for the loss of Jay Crowder, but the thing is, Jay is a bigger player. He's probably a better player, and more importantly than that, he filled in that power forward position, and now the power forward position is Kelly Olynyk. That's a big downgrade. Also, their overall offense has had some struggles. For example, they are now number 1 in the league in turnovers, when last year they were 12th, which was also not good, but first is a whole lot worse. Part of this has to be blamed on Jimmy and Dragic being out, as they are 2 of the lead ball handlers, and once they were gone, that leaves you with Kendrick Nunn and Tyler Hero as your ball handlers, and that's a pretty big downgrade. As a result of that, as well as the three-point shooting dipping, the Heat have went from 7th in offensive rating last year to 25th this year. But you can make the argument, hey, injuries are a thing, and the three-point shooting just being rough this early is like, hey, that's just tough. But at the same time, I mean, we're 26 games into this thing, and at a certain point, you can't just blame it on a poor shooting streak. The injuries, I'm not going to blame anyone for that, but also I will say that the starters, when they've all been together, have still not been amazing. Now, part of that is they've never really had the potential to build up the total chemistry again from last season, just because players have been in and out of lineups, and that definitely matters. But I don't think everything wrong with the Heat can just be excused by these factors. On to some positives, though. There's really not much. The only thing that I can really say is that Bam has kind of picked up the offensive slack. This year he's averaging 20 points per game, and he's been a great mid-range shooter. About 40% of his shots are coming from mid-range, where he is shooting in the mid to low 40s, which is not amazing, but it's decent enough to where, like, yeah, Bam is a respectable mid-range shooter, and that's definitely nice. And that's gotten his scoring volume up a good amount. And then after that, I mean, Max Struss off of the bench is a decent shooter. I mean, he's also just playing 15 minutes per game. So it's not a big deal. That's kind of all there is for positives, though. But that is the Heat struggle. Now, what can the Heat do to get better? Well, the consistency with the lineups with being healthy and just the three simply going in more, I think is going to make a world of difference. But I'm also noticing that there is just some things with this roster that appear rough that previously might not have stood out as much. But I think with all of these in and out of lineup stuff and the missing shots, it's exposing some weaknesses that were previously hidden pretty well. But I do think, injury out of the way, shots going in more, I think the Heat are going to be just fine, and I still think they're going to be in the contender category, although maybe not this year because they might be in such a deep hole that they can't really dig themselves out of it. But at the very least, I think they are a contender level team in talent. It's just been really rough for them this year. Things have not been going their way, to say the least. But as for the conversation, were the 2020 Heat that went to the finals frauds? Well, I mean, I think I've made it clear that I don't think the Heat this year are bad, so to call them frauds, I don't think is really fair. Not to mention that the 2020 Heat in the regular season were not all that amazing either. I mean, they were the 5th seed. This is the reason why they were the underdogs, because nobody saw them as a great team in the NBA. No one thought they were going to be a team that could make the finals, of all things. So it's not like this team is built to thrive in the regular season. I did not expect the Heat to be like one of the top 3 teams in the Eastern Conference. I also didn't expect them to be one of the bottom 5 teams in the Eastern Conference. But hey, here we are. But I don't think the Heat struggles in the regular season really factor in too much for me being concerned that the Heat last year were frauds. I don't think they were. And the reason why is just that even though there were a lot of things you could view as fluky in what the Heat did last year, you can kind of pick shit apart like that for pretty much any playoff run. Like, you can be like, oh, the Bucks, they kind of beat themselves more than the Heat beat them. The Celtics might not have been ready. Even though the Heat gave them a series in the finals, it was pretty obvious the Lakers were going to win that one the whole way. And even then, Jimmy had to give his all so that they could just limp to the finish line there. Even though all of that there's some element of truth to all of that, I think you can kind of pick apart just about any playoff run ever made if you really want to put it through that critical of a lens. And I think because the Heat have struggled so much in this regular season, that run in particular has gotten a critical lens that is undeserved, a critical lens that otherwise would not be there, and this wouldn't be a question whatsoever. Now, sure, it's fair to ask the question with the context of these struggles, but I definitely would not make the argument that what they did last year is invalid in any way whatsoever. Now, does it make me say, hey, that was probably an overperformance? Well, I mean, I kind of already thought that to begin with, so I can't even really feel that way. Like, I still believed that the Bucks and even the Nets were going to be better than the Heat this year in terms of, like, actually winning the championship as well, not just like, hey, they'll have a better regular season. Even before the James Harden trade, before the season started, I believed that those teams would be better than the Miami Heat, and that has been the case for the most part. I mean, this is not a regular season team, first of all, and second of all, I kind of felt like the Heat overachieved last year, but I feel like for the most part we knew that. Like, did people think the Heat were just going to be making multiple finals appearances in a row? Because I didn't, not unless they got some other star level player. Either way though, I think the Miami Heat are going to be fine. I would not claim that the Heat run in 2020 was a fluke by any means. Sure, there was some elements of overachieving and maybe a few things that just factored in their way that helped a lot, but I think that happens a lot And at the end of the day, none of this matters because nothing matters. So that's life. Don't know why I go with such a dark ending, but I didn't really know how to end this video. So the Miami Heat, we're not frauds, and I think they'll be fine. That's about it. Again, go check out that podcast if you have not yet, and go check out that My NBA video if you have not yet. But that is the end of this video. But shout out to Rudy for editing this video. That is the end of this video. Please be sure to like and subscribe for more NBA content like this, and cue the outro music.